Bratty girls dropped the child down a pit at Academy, but she struck back. Lenora Abernathy had been at Crestwood Academy for precisely a month when the dismantling began. The dated auditorium was getting a facelift, and a large section of the campus was blocked off by reflective tape and metal fences. Students were told to stay clear of the area, though everyone knew some kids still used it as a shortcut to get to their after-school activities quicker. Lenora was aware because she had been studying, watching, learning the habits of this place as she had learned at every other school she attended. At 16, Lenora was short for her age, barely 5'3", with auburn hair that she typically kept tied in a messy braid and clothes that were simple but clearly hand-me-downs. Her family had come to town after her mother took a position at the nearby bakery, and Lenora had perfected the skill of going unseen. She kept her gaze low, spoke only when required, and tried to disappear into the scenery of classrooms and corridors. What nobody at Crestwood Academy understood was that Lenora had spent the past 3 years practicing self-defense techniques at her former school. Her previous town had a local dojo where a former police officer named Sensei Tanaka taught children at no cost, and Lenora had been his most dedicated student. She'd obtained her brown belt in Aikido and had been competing in local events prior to the relocation. But here, in this new location, she had pledged to herself and her parents to have a fresh start, to attempt to be ordinary, to steer clear of the altercations that had landed her in hot water before. The tormenting began on her initial day. Tiffany Kensington was the head honcho of the junior class, stylish and well-liked, with a posse of friends who listened to her every word. Tiffany had noticed Lenora instantly, the manner predators recognized their prey, and had figured that the reserved new child was an easy target. "Check out her shoes," Tiffany had snickered loudly enough for Lenora to overhear as she walked by their eating spot. "I believe my baby brother had those exact ones in grade school." Lenora had kept moving, her cheeks growing hot with humiliation. She had realized long ago that reacting only made things worse, and she was determined to keep her commitment about staying out of trouble. The harassment intensified over the coming days. Tiffany and her posse, which contained 2 other girls named Kimberly and Melissa, made it their goal to make Lenora's life miserable. They would bump into her in the walkways, knock her books to the floor, and make loud remarks about her outfit whenever she was within earshot. "Oh my gosh, did you catch what she wore yesterday?" Kimberly would say, glancing right at Lenora. "I felt so sad for her, I almost donated some of my old outfits." Lenora endured it all quietly. She would eat lunch alone in the music room, take the circuitous route to classes to avoid the crowded hallways, and try to schedule her movements so she would not run into Tiffany's group. But Crestwood Academy wasn't that big, and eventually there was nowhere left to escape. The most awful part was that teachers appeared unaware of what was happening. Professor Jennings, Lenora's history teacher, would praise her essays, but never noticed how Lenora jumped when Tiffany and her companions whispered and snickered behind her. Coach Riley, the sports instructor, was too absorbed with his star players to notice that Lenora constantly chose to sit on her own during team practices. Other students observed but never got involved. Lenora understood why. Tiffany's group held social power, and going against them meant becoming a target yourself. She'd witnessed it occur at other schools. The onlookers weren't mean, they were just looking out for themselves. However, Lenora's self-control was wearing thin. Every evening, she would return home and practice her moves in the basement, practicing the patterns and methods that Sensei Tanaka had drilled into her. Her parents noticed her anxiety, but blamed it on the normal challenges of beginning at a new school. They had no idea their child was fighting an internal battle between her promise to stay out of trouble and her escalating urge to retaliate. The final straw occurred on a damp Wednesday in November. Lenora had been attempting to avoid the main corridor between classes, so she had chosen to cut through the construction area. She realized it was against the guidelines, but she was desperate to avoid another meeting with Tiffany's crew. The space was mostly empty, just some ladders and a deep hole in the ground where they were setting up new electrical lines. Lenora was almost through when she heard the well-known sound of Tiffany's giggle echoing behind her. "Well, well, well, look what we have here," Tiffany called out, her voice coated with false sweetness. "The tiny rat believes she can wander around where she's not authorized to be." Lenora's stomach dropped. She turned to face Tiffany, Kimberly, and Melissa, who had created a semicircle blocking her route back to the main corridor. The building hole was behind her, about 5 feet wide and 5 feet deep, with exposed cement and electrical wiring that appeared sharp and risky. "I was just trying to get to class," Lenora said softly, hoping to diffuse the situation. "Oh, you were just trying to get to class," Tiffany mocked, imitating Lenora's voice. "How cute. But you know what? I don't believe you belong here. I don't believe you belong anywhere, actually." The three girls drew nearer, and Lenora felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before a fight. But she fought it down, remembering her vow, remembering all the problems fighting had caused her before. "Please, I just want to go to class," Lenora said, taking a step backward. "Please, I just want to go to class," Kimberly repeated in a whining voice, and all three girls giggled. "You know what your issue is?" Tiffany said, her voice turning nasty. "You're a loser. You're weak. You just take everything we give out and never retaliate. It's actually kind of pathetic." Lenora's hands tightened into fists at her sides, but she forced herself to relax them. "I don't want any trouble." "Too bad," Melissa said, stepping forward. "Because trouble found you?" What occurred next appeared to occur in slow motion. Tiffany gave Lenora a hard shove backward, and Lenora stumbled, her feet sliding on the dirty cement. She attempted to regain her balance, but Kimberly pushed her from the side, and Melissa grabbed her satchel, pulling her further off balance. "Stop!" Lenora shouted, but Tiffany just chuckled. "Make us!" Tiffany teased, and then she shoved Lenora hard with both hands. Lenora fell backward into the construction hole, her arms flailing as she attempted to grab hold of something. She landed hard on her back, the impact knocking the air out of her chest. Sharp fragments of cement cut into her arms and legs, and she felt something warm and wet on her head where she'd hit a metal bar. Above her, the three girls peered down into the hole, their faces showing a combination of satisfaction and slight worry. "Whoops," Tiffany said with fake innocence. "Looks like little Lenora had an accident." Lenora lay there for a moment, tasting blood in her mouth, feeling the sting of cuts on her arms and the ache of bruises forming on her back. She'd vowed herself she would stay out of trouble, promised her parents she would attempt to be ordinary, promised that she would abandon her fighting days behind. However, as she looked up at the three faces smiling down at her, something snapped. The promise she had made to herself suddenly appeared less important than the promise she had made to Sensei Tanaka years ago. Never allow anyone to push you around when you have the ability to stop them. Lenora wiped the blood from her head and slowly got to her feet. Every muscle in her body throbbed, but beneath the pain, she felt something else. Clarity, purpose, the familiar calm that came before a fight. "Are you all right down there?" Kimberly called down, her voice full of fake concern. "Maybe you should be more mindful of where you're walking." Lenora glanced up at them and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying a confidence that hadn't been there before, "I think I'm exactly where I need to be." She found a handhold on one of the exposed bars and began to climb out of the hole. The three girls watched, their expressions shifting from amusement to confusion as Lenora emerged from the hole like something rising from the earth. "What are you doing?" Tiffany demanded, but there was something in her voice that hadn't been there before. Uncertainty. Lenora brushed the dirt and cement shards from her clothing and glanced at each of the three girls in turn. "I'm done being pushed around." "Oh, please," Tiffany scoffed, but she took a step backward. "What are you going to do? You're nobody. You're weak." Lenora's smile widened. "You know what? You're right. I was weak, but not because I couldn't fight back. I was weak because I was too afraid to stand up for myself." She took a step forward, and all three girls instinctively stepped back. "See, here's the thing you don't know about me," Lenora continued, her voice steady and calm. "I've been practicing self-defense for 3 years. I have a brown belt in Aikido, and I've won 11 local fighting competitions. I didn't retaliate because I was attempting to be a better person, attempting to avoid trouble. But you know what I learned today?" She took another step forward, and Tiffany bumped into the wall behind her. "Sometimes trouble finds you anyway, and when it does, you better be ready to handle it." Tiffany's face had gone pale. "You're lying. You're just attempting to scare us." Lenora shrugged. "Maybe, but are you willing to bet on it?" The three girls glanced at each other, and Lenora could see the doubt creeping into their expressions. They'd been so certain of their power, so confident in their ability to intimidate her. But now, faced with someone who wasn't backing down, they weren't sure what to do. "Look," Melissa said, her voice less confident than before, "we were just fooling around. We didn't mean for you to get hurt." "Oh, but you did," Lenora replied. "You absolutely did. You dropped me into that hole hoping I would get hurt. You wanted me to be scared and humiliated. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted." She rolled her shoulders, loosening the muscles that had been tense for weeks. "But now it's my turn." Tiffany straightened up, attempting to regain her composure. "You can't do anything to us. There are 3 of us and 1 of you. And if you touch us, we'll tell everyone you attacked us for no reason." Lenora nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. There are 3 of you, and normally that would be a problem for most people. But I'm not most people." She moved faster than any of them expected. One moment she was standing 3 feet away, and the next she was directly in front of Tiffany, close enough that Tiffany could see the small cut on her head still bleeding. "Here's what's going to happen," Lenora said quietly. "You're going to apologize, all 3 of you, and then you're going to leave me alone, forever." Tiffany's bravado cracked. "You can't make us do anything." "Can't I?" Lenora asked, and before Tiffany could react, Lenora's hand shot out and grabbed Tiffany's wrist. She applied just enough pressure to make Tiffany gasp, using a technique Sensei Tanaka had taught her for controlling opponents without actually hurting them. "Let go of me!" Tiffany demanded, but her voice was shaky. "In a minute," Lenora said calmly. "First, I want to make sure you understand something. I spent 3 years learning how to defend myself because I was tired of being pushed around. I learned how to deliver strikes that can drop someone twice my size. I learned how to use leverage and technique to make up for what I lack in size and strength. I learned how to defend myself." She increased the pressure slightly on Tiffany's wrist, and Tiffany winced. "I also learned when to fight and when to walk away. For 1 month I chose to walk away. I chose to be the bigger person. I chose to attempt to handle this like a civilized human being. But you know what? You didn't want civilized. You wanted me to be a victim." Lenora released Tiffany's wrist and stepped back. Tiffany rubbed her wrist, staring at Lenora with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "So here's your choice," Lenora continued. "You can apologize right now, and we can all walk away from this. Or you can keep pushing, and I'll show you exactly what 3 years of self-defense training looks like." Kimberly and Melissa were already backing toward the exit, but Tiffany stood her ground, her pride warring with her fear. "You wouldn't dare," Tiffany said, but her voice lacked conviction. Lenora sighed. "You really don't get it, do you? You think this is about being tough or proving something, but it's not. It's about respect. And right now you have 2 choices. You can give me the respect I deserve, or I can take it." She shifted her stance slightly, dropping into a fighting position that was subtle but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Her weight shifted to the balls of her feet, her hands relaxed but ready, her center of gravity lowered. Tiffany's eyes widened as she recognized the change in Lenora's posture. This wasn't the scared, reserved child she'd been tormenting. This was someone who knew how to fight. "Okay," Tiffany said quickly. "Okay, I'm sorry. We're sorry. It was just a joke that went too far." Lenora shook her head. "No, it wasn't a joke. It was bullying. It was cruel. And it was meant to hurt me. If you're going to apologize, at least be honest about what you're apologizing for." Tiffany's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Fine, we bullied you. We were mean to you. We pushed you into that hole because we wanted to hurt you. Are you happy now?" "I'm not happy," Lenora said. "I'm disappointed. Disappointed that it took me getting hurt for you to finally be honest. Disappointed that you needed to be threatened before you'd show basic human decency. But I'm not surprised." She glanced at each of the three girls in turn. "Here's what's going to happen now. You're going to leave me alone. You're going to stop making comments about my clothes, my outfit, or anything else about me. You're going to treat me like a human being, or you're going to ignore me completely. Those are your only two options." "And if we don't?" Melissa asked, her voice small. Lenora's smile was cold. "Then you'll find out what happens when you push someone who spent 3 years learning how to push back." The three girls exchanged glances, and Lenora could see the moment they made their decision. The power dynamic that had defined their relationship for 1 month had completely shifted, and they all knew it. "We'll leave you alone," Tiffany said quietly. Lenora nodded. "Good. Now get out of here before I change my mind about being reasonable." The three girls hurried toward the exit, whispering among themselves as they left. Lenora watched them go, then slowly sank down to sit on a section of ladder, the adrenaline finally leaving her system. She glanced down at her cut arms and torn clothing, then at the hole she'd fallen into. For the first time in weeks, she felt like herself again. Not the scared, reserved child who'd been attempting to disappear, but Lenora Abernathy, the child who had obtained her brown belt through discipline and hard work, who had realized to stand up for herself and others. The next day at school, word had spread about what occurred in the construction zone. Lenora wasn't sure how much of the story was accurate, but she noticed that other students glanced at her differently, some with curiosity, some with respect, and a few with wariness, but none with pity. Tiffany and her friends gave her a wide berth, barely acknowledging her presence in the hallways. Lenora was fine with that. She'd never wanted to be their friend. She just wanted to be left alone. But something unexpected occurred in the days that followed. Other students began approaching her, kids who'd been reserved and withdrawn, who'd kept to themselves the manner Lenora had. They didn't say much, but they would nod when they passed her in the walkways or sit at nearby tables in the eating area. Lenora realized that she wasn't the only one who had been attempting to go unseen. A week later, Lenora was eating lunch in the eating area when a freshman boy named Daniel approached her table. He was short for his age, with thick glasses and a nervous demeanor that reminded Lenora of herself from years ago. "Excuse me," he said softly. "Are you Lenora Abernathy?" Lenora nodded, wondering what he wanted. "I heard about what occurred with Tiffany and her friends," Daniel said, glancing around nervously. "I was wondering, do you think you could teach me how to stand up for myself? I mean, I know you know self-defense and stuff, and I was thinking maybe—" Lenora glanced at the boy, seeing her younger self in his hopeful but scared expression. She thought about Sensei Tanaka, who had taken time out of his day to teach children like her at no cost. She thought about the promise she had made to herself to stay out of trouble, and how keeping that promise had almost gotten her seriously hurt. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But Daniel, you don't need to know self-defense to stand up for yourself. Sometimes you just need to remember that you're worth standing up for." Daniel smiled, The first genuine smile Lenora had seen from another student since arriving at Crestwood Academy. "Thanks. I'll remember that." As Lenora watched him walk away, she realized that her experience with Tiffany and her friends had taught her something important. Being strong wasn't about avoiding conflict or about dominating others. It was about realizing when to fight and when to walk away, when to show mercy and when to stand firm. It was about respecting yourself enough to demand respect from others. She would never be the reserved, unseen child again. But she would also never be the kind of person who used her strength to hurt others the manner Tiffany had hurt her. She had found a middle ground, a place where she could be both strong and kind, both confident and humble. Lenora finished her lunch and headed to her next class, walking with her head up and her shoulders back. She wasn't hiding anymore, and she wasn't looking for trouble. But if trouble found her again, she was ready for it. And more importantly, she was ready to help others who might not be ready to face their own troubles alone. The child who had fallen into that hole 1 month ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger, not because she could fight, but because she had realized that sometimes the most important battle is the one you fight for yourself. Characters 2179.